The figures were two men. One of them was advanced in age, while the other looked like he was around Adago's age. "Don't move," the man who was more advanced in age commanded, as Adago made to run away. "Who are you, and what is your mission along this forest path?" he asked, to confirm if Adago was a human or a supernatural being. "Please, don't kill me," Adago pleaded, her voice trembling with fear, as she immediately stopped in her tracks. "I am flesh and blood like you. Please, please don't kill me," she pleaded over and over, trying her best to convince these men that she was not an evil spirit disguised as a human. "If truly you are not a wicked spirit hiding on this dark path to attack your next prey, why then are you here? Do you have any idea how dangerous these forest paths are for mere humans, especially at night?" The old man's voice thundered into the night as he questioned Adago. "Please, I am just an innocent maiden who life has treated unfairly. I was exiled from my kingdom. My people cast me out," Adago replied, carefully omitting the details about her being royalty. She did not want to sound like a liar to them, because this wicked act done to her was almost unbelievable to everyone who got the news. "Exiled? But why?" he asked. Adago, who was by this time short of words, burst into tears. Her encounter with these men stamped in her mind the position Ikem's wicked decision had reduced her to. She now felt like a woman who had been caught in a criminal act and desperately begging for her life to be spared. The emotional trauma Ikem had caused her these past months, including the loss of her mother, flashed before her eyes. Adago wept uncontrollably, leaving the two men feeling sorry for her. They were not yet fully convinced by Adago's explanations, but they decided to help her, believing that their kind act would appease her if she turned out to be a supernatural being. "Please, stop crying. Don't be afraid. We are hunters from Umuago, a faraway village. We are just passing through this region. My name is Agudike, and this is my father, Dike, the great hunter of Umuago village," the younger man said gently. Agudike was a softer version of his father, Dike, who was popularly known as a fierce and skillful hunter in their village. Seeing that Adago had no plans to stop crying, and the night was getting thicker, Dike quickly added, "We have a lot of questions for you, but it is not safe out here. We must keep moving. You can come with us. Our village is far away, but you'll be safe there." Adago was too worn out by sorrow to even object. Whether these men would turn out to be evil people, she did not know, and she was not left with any better option. She just wanted to be in the company of humans, and so she followed them. 2 days after the men found and rescued Adago, they all finally arrived at the men's village, Omoago. They got to their home, and the woman whom Adago suspected to be Dike's wife and Agudike's mother came out of the house to welcome them. The woman was not very surprised to see Adago, as this was not the first time her husband was bringing home a stranger. She kindly tended to Adago, providing her with water to wash herself and food to eat. After eating, she was then taken to the room that had been prepared for her to rest her tired body. Adago was moved to tears. The woman saw the gratitude in her eyes, and she only smiled and urged her to rest. Adago slept through the day. With these people, she had found hope, something she lost when she saw Ikem bring in the maiden whom she had caught him with as a second wife. She woke up later that night, feeling better than she had felt the previous days. That evening, she fabricated and told them a false story about why she was exiled. still determined to keep her connection to royalty a secret. She also dropped her name, Adago, and told them that her name was Onyinyechi. This was the name which Oluchi had given her during her years in Nto village. They greatly empathized with her, and from that day, she became part of the family. For the next 1 year, Adago lived with Dike and his family, and they treated her like family. She saw for herself that this family always had a stranger they were rendering help to, although most of these strangers returned to their families or went their way few weeks after they were brought to the house. However, there was a particular man whom she guessed would be in his 70s. His name was Dede. He was taken away from time to time to different herbalist homes because he had an ailment which had proven difficult to cure. He hardly spoke. He would sit for hours just staring into space, and Adago could see the sadness in his eyes. Dede was the first stranded stranger Dike had helped, and from that day, he continued to help several other stranded strangers. Sometimes, Adago would sit with Dede and tell him stories. It was obvious he enjoyed listening to her, because one could see the warmth in his eyes while Adago narrated these stories to him. Dede was not the only person Adago was drawn to. She and Agudike grew and nurtured feelings for each other. Agudike was a gentle and loving young man. He was also as successful as his father in hunting, and he had his own possessions. He lived in his own house not too far from his father's compound. He and Adago loved each other so much, and they decided to get married. However, while the marriage preparations were in full swing, Adago still did her best to spend time with Dede, singing to him and telling him stories. One fateful day, after she had wrapped up her story, she began to sing her favorite lullaby composed by her mother. This was not the first time she was singing it to Dede, although she noticed he looked like someone in distress whenever she sang the song. She was not sure why he always reacted that way, but it didn't stop her from singing the song to him every time she told him stories. That fateful evening, Dede's reaction was worse. He held his head and almost fell off his seat when Adago rushed to help him. In panic and with trembling hands, Adago tried to steady him. Overwhelmed with fear, she decided in her heart not to sing the song to him again to avoid causing more havoc to Dede's health. While still holding him with trembling hands, Dede looked closely into her face as though it was his first time of seeing her. Adago, he called her, his voice ringing with uncertainty. With his hand still holding his head, he passed out. Adago was confused. She began to ask herself questions. What just happened? How did Dede know my real name? But everyone here knows me as Onyinyechi. Snapping back to reality, she ignored the questions she had and began calling out for help. Dike and Agudike, who had taken a stroll around the area, rushed into the compound that moment and helped carry Dede to his room. Adago remained silent about the details of what happened that evening because she hoped it was just a coincidence, and when Dede woke up he would forget about whatever had transpired between them and life would continue as normal for her, seeing that she was getting married to Agudike soon. When Dede woke up the next morning, with a surprised look in his face, he looked at the faces of Dike and his son, who never left his side because they were so worried his health would deteriorate further. "Who are you?" he asked them both. "Why am I here? Where is my princess Adago?" He threw one question after another at them. These questions did not make any sense to Dike and his son. First of all, why was he asking them who they were when he had lived with them for the past 30 years? And secondly, who was Adago and how was she his princess? Adago waited outside nervously for Dede to awaken that morning. When she overheard him asking those questions, Her heart began to pound harder, as though it would pop out of her chest. Her connection to royalty, which she kept a secret, would soon be uncovered, and she didn't know how Agudike and his father would react when they learnt this truth. But then, could this scarier revelation be true? If Dede called her his princess, then could it be Dede was once a servant in the palace who had now recognized and identified her? Still puzzled by these questions, she walked into Dede's room with a mixture of sadness and confusion. Her gaze was met by the confused stares of Agudike and his father. As soon as Dede saw her, he stood up sharply. He looked at her with eyes that seemed to see through time. "Madam, why are we here? Where is your mother?" he asked, confused. Now Adago was more confused than ever. She thought to herself, why did Dede call me his daughter? Could this be impossible? She caught herself in her thoughts. This can't be. My mother told me my father died a long time ago. The air in the room was a mixture of confusion and fear, but piece by piece, the truth began to unfold. Dede was none other than King Obiago, who had lost his memory after the accident. Dike was the hunter who found him and took him in, and he had cared for King Obiago ever since. The memory treatments King Obiago underwent had slowly begun to work, but it was the lullaby Adago always sang to him that brought him back fully. That song was composed by his queen, Chimwanya, so it was no surprise that it would have such strong effects on him. That day of the accident, when Obiago awoke, he found himself in the forest, drenched by the rain. The shivers he felt were nothing compared to the severe pains he felt in his head and his lower back. He laid motionless with his memory completely blank, desperately hoping that someone would come to his aid. Agudike was beyond broken to hear this revelation about his intended wife. He felt betrayed that Adago had hidden such important history from him. He was happy that she had reunited with her father, but he called off the wedding with her because he felt that Adago did not trust him enough to be open with him about who she really was. All efforts to make him change his mind were in vain. Adago was torn between the joy of reuniting with her father and the pain of losing her beloved husband-to-be. However, she accepted her fate. Few days later, King Obiago decided to return to Ijele Kingdom with his daughter. Only Dike agreed to guide them on the long journey back. Upon arriving the kingdom, the people of Ijele who recognized King Obiago gasped in shock, believing they had seen a ghost. The news spread like wildfire within the kingdom. Rumors began to fly around that Princess Adago had returned to Ijele with King Obiago's ghost to torment the tyrant King Ikem. But when they confirmed this wasn't King Obiago's ghost but him in flesh and blood, the people rushed from their homes into the village square, singing and rejoicing that God had answered their prayers. The first point of action for the chiefs of Ijele was to dethrone that rascal of a king called Ikem and reinstall their beloved King Obiago. According to the kingdom's traditions, a new king could not rule if a former king was still alive and unwilling to give up his throne. The people, with renewed hope and determination, dethroned Ikem. They retrieved all he had forcefully obtained from the people of Ijele and drove him and his numerous wives and children away from the palace. Adago refused to even set her eyes on him, even though he pleaded with King Obiago to let him see Adago. She stayed away from all the activities and nursed her broken heart in the confines of her chambers, her heart yearning for Agudike. Young man, you seem to have so much guts. I would have had you hanged and the birds of the air feed off your cursed flesh for the damage you caused my daughter and my precious people. The first reason I am sparing you is because God turned your wicked intentions around and used it as a means to reconnect me to my daughter and my people. And the second reason is that these innocent children your abominable acts brought into this world do not deserve to be without a father. But these reasons do not exempt you from being punished. You must be punished. When King Obiago was done addressing Ikem, he ordered the guards to thoroughly beat him up and make him work as a laborer in the farmlands of the physically challenged villagers for the rest of his life. The entire kingdom celebrated the return of their rightful ruler, and gradually things were restored to normalcy in Ijele Kingdom. King Obiago resumed his reign, supported by his daughter Adago. Peace and prosperity returned to the land. The people rejoiced, knowing they had a king who cared for them. However, King Obiago's joy was incomplete because he did not get a second chance to see his warrior queen, Chimwanya. He never stopped mourning her. However, he did not let his grieving interfere with his responsibility to his people. Adago, on the other hand, did not heal from her broken courtship with Agudike, and he too could not move on from her. One day, consumed with the thoughts of her and seeing that the pain of losing Adago, whom he loved so dearly, was much more than the pain of her betrayal, Agudike decided to forgive her. Although he wasn't sure if her status would let her take him back as her husband-to-be, but he was willing to see her again and tell her how he felt. So he journeyed with his father to Ijele Kingdom. When Adago was called from her chambers that she had a guest, she reluctantly came out, and when she saw Agudike, she ran and fell on her knees before him, pleading for his forgiveness over again. This was a confirmation for Agudike that his bride-to-be was still very much his. He embraced her. Speaking softly to her, he told her he had forgiven her and asked her again to marry him, and she hurriedly accepted. Their wedding was a grand celebration of love and courage. While the people of Ijele prayed and hoped that this new husband would not turn out to be like Ikem, King Obiago knew his daughter had made the right choice. When King Obiago eventually passed on, Adago and Agudike, her husband, ruled Ijele Kingdom with wisdom, ensuring that the legacy of compassion, integrity, and strength continued. Under their leadership, Ijele Kingdom flourished and everyone lived happily. The lessons we can learn from this story are numerous, but the one I would like to highlight is that destiny, though delayed by trials, cannot be denied. Like King Obiago and Adago, who were separated from their kingdom for so many years, but destiny ensured they returned to their rightful place. Also, the story shows us that compassion and justice should be the foundation of all leadership, because the greatest leaders lead with their hearts and they always put the welfare of their people first. Dearest viewer, thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share this video with everyone whom you think will be inspired by this story. Don't forget to tell me in the comment section what other lessons you think we can learn from the story. Until my next story, bye.